But first, let's head over to Davos and the World Economic Forum's annual shindig, where the appalling Antonio Guterres, head Kommissar of the United Socialist Nations, is outraged.
I'm outraged that so many countries and companies are pursuing their own narrow interests without any consideration for our shared future or our common goals. And I'm certain that unless we take action, we can expect much, much worse.
Oh, yes, poor old unelected Guterres is upset that there are democratic countries and citizens out there who value their own independence and political agency, and there are companies, still some, who still believe that their job is to make a profit. Dear oh dear, what can be done, Antonio?
So, dear friends, the institutions and frameworks of global governance, from the Security Council to the Bretton Woods system, were created 80 years ago. We can't build a future for our grandchildren with a system built for our grandparents.
Oh, really, can't we? So we translated from the original Communist Manifesto, what Guterres basically is saying, let's scrap capitalism and democracy that have been so effective and impose socialist authoritarianism, which has been a disaster, which is built on surveillance and compliance and authoritarianism in the name of fighting climate change and mysterious pandemics. That's what they're threatening. Thus, as has been the case every year recently, much of the chat at Davos from bankers and woke business elites and socialists was around the tantalizing introduction of digital passports and digital currencies.
The interesting part of it is that, yes, it is very necessary for financial services, but not only.
Sure.
It's also good for school enrollment. It's also good for health, who actually got a vaccination or not. It's very good to get your subsidies, from the government.
Yes, that was the unelected Queen of the Netherlands touting vaccines. Once you've signed up to your digital passport, then you'll have no choice other than to comply with this doozy, a long-time favourite of the Davos crowd.
We're developing, through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
Be careful. You hear the words CBDCs, central business digital, central bank digital currencies, or digital passports. That's what's coming down the line for you. Now, you may be thinking that this totalitarian dystopian nightmare is just around the corner, which it is. So why am I positive about 2024? Well, because the harder these lunatics push these agenda, the more the public, or at least some of the public, is waking up. This is the year of the common sense revolution. It was a delight to see Klaus Schwab, viewed by many as the best Bond villain Ian Fleming never invented, complaining that, quote, a political revolution has destroyed his appalling Great Reset. Good. Klaus Schwab blames something he calls libertarianism, which wants to tear down the system, his system, as being the root of all evil. Really? In fact, the political revolution Klaus complains about is called common sense. And the common sense revolution is the enemy of globalist power trips and authoritarian fantasists. As we are now seeing, in America this week, House Republicans introduced a Defund Davos Act designed to withdraw all federal funds going to the World Economic Forum. Common sense revolution. Even here in Australia, according to the Financial Review, our business and political elites are shunning Davos. Very few business leaders and no ministers have bothered to attend this year. In fact, laughably, the only prominent elite we have sent to hobnob with B-grade lovey celebrities like pop star Sting was our own yesterday's man, Kevin Rudd, former Prime Minister and summit junketeer par excellence. Much like Sting, it's been many, many years since Kev has been a hit in the charts. But never fear. As I said, 2024 is the year of common sense and political change, and it kicked off with an almighty bang right here at Davos in an act of undercover subversion and villain slaying better than any James Bond film. A secret undercover hero took to the stage at Davos this year and blew the entire globalist enterprise to smithereens. Yes, the new James Bond was newly elected president of Argentina, Javier Milei, who spoke for 23 minutes in what the Finn described as the fieriest speech ever delivered at Davos. I'd love to play the whole speech to you, but I urge you to watch it online later after the show. It is dubbed, weirdly, by AI, quite remarkably into English, but with Javier's accent. I've selected what for me were the highlights, but basically Javier warns that it is Davos and the global elites, the audience in front of him, who are the real problem in today's world, and he warns that the entire West, all of us, are in perilous danger. As he explains in great detail, capitalism has been subverted by big governments of all persuasions working with massive, out-of-control bureaucracies and these unelected institutions that produce nothing, but siphon off the productivity and the wealth, endlessly increasing the taxes on everyday productive citizens to feed the vanity projects of the parasitic elites and an out-of-control welfare state that is pure socialism in all but name. And socialism, as Javier repeatedly points out, always ends in poverty, destitution, and death.
Today, I am present to inform you that the Western world is facing a significant threat. It is in danger because those who are supposed to defend the values of the Western world are co-opted by a worldview that inevitably leads to socialism and consequently to poverty and economic deprivation. Now, when studying per capita GDP from 1800 to today, what is observed is that after the Industrial Revolution, global per capita GDP multiplied by more than 15 times, generating an explosion of wealth that lifted 90% of the world's population out of poverty. We must never forget that by the year 1800, about 95% of the world's population lived in extreme poverty, while that number dropped to 5% by the year 2020, prior to the pandemic. The conclusion is obvious. Far from being the cause of our problems, free market capitalism as an economic system is the only tool we have to end hunger, poverty, and destitution throughout the planet. In other words, the capitalist, the successful entrepreneur, is a social benefactor who contributes to the well-being of society as a whole. In short, a successful entrepreneur is a hero, because it should never be observed that socialism is always and everywhere impoverishing, failed in all countries where attempted. It was a failure economically, it was a failure socially, it was a failure culturally, and it also killed more than 100 million human beings.
Indeed. After pointing out the manifest successes of capitalism and the failures of socialism, Javier Milei then describes in great detail how the free markets have been completely compromised by Western governmental bureaucratic intervention. And he asserts, as an economist, that there is no such thing by definition as market failure. And indeed, that the only time markets fail is where there is some form of state intervention or coercion. Indeed, net zero, renewable subsidies, taxes, red tape, green tape, black tape. President Milei then goes on to list how the West has embraced any number of social justice causes, such as feminism, climate change, yada yada, that have distorted and destroyed our productive markets.
The solution that collectivists will propose is not greater freedom, but greater regulation, generating a downward spiral of regulations until we all become poorer and the lives of all of us depend on a bureaucrat sitting in a luxury office. This radical feminism agenda has led to increased state intervention, hindering the economic process. It provides jobs to bureaucrats who haven't contributed anything to society, whether through women's ministries or international organizations promoting this agenda. Unfortunately, these harmful ideas have strongly permeated our society. Neo-Marxists have managed to co-opt the common sense of the Western world. They achieved this through the appropriation of the media, culture, universities, and yes, even international organizations. Fortunately, more of us dare to raise our voices as we see that if we don't confront these ideas head-on, the only possible destiny is more state, more regulation, more socialism, more poverty, less freedom, and consequently, a worse quality of life.
Sound familiar? Javier Milei then lists all the various so-called political ideologies, from fascists and communists to social democrats, globalists, Keynesians, whatever, and concludes they are all ultimately collectivists who believe the state should control you, the individual, rather than libertarians who believe the individual must be free in order for society as a whole to prosper to its full capacity, free of excessive bureaucratic burdens, free of all the regulations and red tape and increased taxes. This is the warning Australia, heading down the same path as Argentina, urgently needs to listen to before it is too late.
The Argentine case is the empirical proof that regardless of wealth, natural resources, population capability, education level, or the amount of gold bars in the central bank's coffers, these factors do not guarantee success. If measures are adopted that hinder the free functioning of markets, free competition, free price systems, if trade is hindered, if private property is attacked, the only possible destination is poverty.
This is the path Australia is now on. Renewables targets and net zero have comprehensively distorted our markets, subsidies, all that stuff. Labor's endless red tape, green tape, and now black tape is crippling not only industry and manufacturing, we heard earlier how it is plummeting manufacturing in this country, but small businesses and entrepreneurs. You feel it. You try and set up a cafe or a job or a shop. We are no longer the Australia of freedom and innovation. Look around you. We are hurtling towards being the new Argentina.
Don't be intimidated by the political caste or the parasites who live off the state. Don't yield to a political class that only wants to prolong its power and preserve its privileges. Do not yield to the advance of the state. The state is not the solution. The state is the problem itself.
As I said, if this were a James Bond film, Javier Milei was George Lazenby, 007, undercover in the Smersh villain's sinister lair high in the Swiss Alps. And, well... But wait, there was more. Bond had, as always, his American sidekick. Here's the Heritage Foundation's Kevin Roberts.
President Trump, if he's the next president, for that matter, I think whoever the next conservative president, is going to take on the power of the elites, which I mentioned earlier. But the thing that I want to drive home here, the very reason that I'm here at Davos, is to explain to many people in this room and who are watching, with all due respect, nothing personal, but that you're part of the problem. Ultimately, Robin, I think President Trump, if in fact he wins a second term, is going to be inspired by the wise words of Javier Milei, who said that he was in power not to guide sheep, but to awaken lions.
Indeed. Kevin Roberts went on to say, and I love this, that the agenda that every member of the Trump administration has is to compile a list of everything that's ever been proposed at the World Economic Forum and ditch it all. And right on cue, just when you thought the Chinese-style surveillance digital passport CBDC world is inevitable, up popped Trump.
And tonight I'm also making another promise to protect Americans from government tyranny. As your president, I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency. Do you know about that?
Hoorah! Yes, I've got a feeling 24 is going to be a good year. Millet, Trump, Poilievre in Canada, Dutton here. It's time to wake up, Lions. The common sense revolution is here.